In this episode of the Dairyland Initiative podcast, we're going to be talking about the essentials of calf barn design. Hi, I'm Courtney Hallbach.
And I'm Nigel Cook.
And this is the Dairyland Initiative podcast,
where we get to discuss issues related to the housing and management of dairy cattle.
Let's dive in. Well, on our last episode, we promised that we'd get back to calves, and we do keep our promises, Dr. Cook.
We did promise, and we said, enough's enough on the cow stuff. Let's get back to calves.
Yeah, I heard enough about that. I want to talk about calves. So today, we're going to talk about the essentials of calf barn design. Dr. Cook was like, we talked about general housing systems, but what do we actually need to do once we have those calves in a hutch or a calf barn? So today we're really going to focus on what any type of calf facility needs to include. Number one is space. I don't know how many times I have gone out on a troubleshooting consult and they're complaining about respiratory disease, and then you look around the barn and
a few too many animals in there.
That could be contributing to the problem. So
yep.
Whenever we're thinking about what type of housing, whether it's hutches, indoor, groups, individual pens, we want to make sure that we are avoiding overstocking. Not only for the calves that are in the pen at the time, you see a lot of increase in illnesses, not as much average daily gain in those overstocked pens, but we also want to avoid transferring anything from those calves that were in the overstocked pen to the next group that's coming in.
Right. Yeah. The animals are the source of dust, heat, moisture, potential pathogens. So the more animals you have in a space, less surface area, less volume. Makes sense.
And it affects other things in the calf barn and your management, such as the air quality and how dry that resting space is. So really focusing on limiting overstocking.
But it's actually more difficult than you think, because we're not dealing with a car production line here.
Oh, no, we're not. What? You're saying that you can't control when cows calve?
Cows get to decide when they calve, Courtney.
I know, that's one of your famous lines, Dr. Cook. So the question is, how do you account for those calving surges throughout the year to make sure that you have plenty of space in the calf barn?
Yeah, we get these times where we have a lot of animals calving, times when fewer animals are calving. So we've got a biological system, not a production line system. So how do we accommodate for that?
Yeah, so we're going to have to overbuild. And you might be saying, but my pocketbook doesn't want me to overbuild.
Well, we like to say if you design around average, you're overstocked half the time, yeah?
Yeah.
So we can't build around average throughput.
And the detrimental effects will cost you in the long term. So typically we're going to overbuild by 125% of your average daily needs.
Average daily calving rate.
And you're going to look at, how many animals you're going to be keeping on the farm. Are you keeping the bulls? Are you raising them for a week or two before sending them off site? Are you just keeping your heifer calves? Are you using sex semen? These are also coming into play.
Sounds like there might be a need for a spreadsheet.
Well, what do you know? There is a calf barn sizing spreadsheet on the Dairyland Initiative website.
Good to know.
Go check that out. And that's going to really help you figure out how much you need based on your strategy. So are you going to have continuous flow where once one calf leaves a pen, another one fills it automatically? Are we looking at more of an all-in, all-out system, which I'll illustrate in a little bit here?
Okay.
But ideally, we would be focusing on that all-in, all-out strategy and minimizing the age range within that barn to 2 to 3 weeks so that we aren't exposing young calves to any pathogens that older animals may be shedding. Yep. And then we also look at how long calves are going to be in the barn. Are they going to be on milk for 8 weeks? Is there going to be a post-wean delay of a week or two just so that you can get them acclimated into a different feeding regimen? And so, looking at your average daily needs, calving needs, plus how many heifers or bulls you're keeping, in addition to how long they're going to be in that
This
barn.
is way more complicated than I thought.
It's getting way more complicated, so that's why you should use the spreadsheet.
Absolutely.
Bottom line.
Absolutely.
But once we figure out our needs, you want to think about the grouping strategy. There's some farms that, once one calf leaves a pen, another calf immediately occupies it. But we don't see a lot of success with that because it's really hard to clean those pens.
Oh, okay. So the bugs build up?
Bugs build up, and it's just boom, boom, boom. So
Okay.
we really like the all-in, all-out strategy. And the idea here is that you would fill a pen, maybe a barn, over 7 to 14 days, possibly up to 3 weeks.
Not too long.
Try to keep it into a short period.
Minimize the age range variation in the group.
Exactly.
Okay.
Once one group is filled, you start filling the second group until the entire barn is full.
Okay. All in.
All in. Then we're going to wait until the youngest calf in that pen has fully transitioned off of milk, and then we will start to empty the pens until the entire barn is empty.
All out.
All out.
Okay.
Now we want to make sure that we have some downtime between groups. So we're going to overbuild slightly so that there's about 1 week of downtime for cleaning to make sure that we get...
This looks expensive, Courtney.
Do you know how...
To have a farmer build a barn and leave it empty for a week?
Go ask the farmers that have done this, and they'll say, it's so great. We had scours go through some sort of an outbreak, and here we were able to let it sit and start anew with that next group.
Break the cycle.
Break that cycle. So
Okay. So there may be a benefit that outweighs the cost.
exactly.
Okay.
Also getting to stocking density, you had mentioned that volume of space, and maybe you thought automatically, oh, resting space, but no, I'm also looking at the volume of barn. And when Dr. Nordland went out and did a survey many years ago, he found that the average volume of barn per calf is about 1,300 cubic feet with a range of about 600 to 3,000. If I'm seeing a 600, if I do a calculation and I'm like, that's getting a little low there, then I'm going to want to reduce that stocking density to get me back up to better air quality, because stocking density is the single most determinant of air quality in the calf barn.
Professor John Webster told me that a number of years ago, Courtney.
Yeah, well, it still rings true.
Long time ago.
I'm sure it was a long time ago, but it still rings true today.
It's true.
One kind of quirk I like to say is, if you double the stocking density inside of the barn, you would need to increase the ventilation tenfold.
Wow.
Maybe in a climate like Arizona, Florida, that's okay.
It's going to be tough to do in a Wisconsin winter.
Yeah, I don't know about here in January. It's going to be cold because our minimum recommended ventilation rate for calves is 4 air changes an hour in the winter. Now, let's say we double that stocking density. We're going to be looking at 40 air changes an hour. Can you just imagine all those frozen
It's not going to work.
frostbite ears?
Yeah.
It's just not going to work.
Not
So
gonna work.
really focus on stocking density, not only in terms of barn volume, but also in that resting space. I'm not counting the feed alley at all in my calculations.
Just the bedded area, yeah.
Just the bedded area. And the size of the animal is going to determine how big that space should be. Now, the minimum, Dr. Cook, okay, is 35 square feet for those newborn calves. And you might be like, okay, yeah.
That's 8 by 4 and a bit.
Yeah, a lot of the newer pens that are out here are getting longer.
Yeah.
But I know that farms that have gone to small group pens have actually gone up to 45 square feet.
Oh, wow.
And it's life-changing, they say. Bedding quality is amazing. So 35 is our minimum. If you can provide more, you are going
You're
to be
focused
happy.
on feces, urine, soaking into that bed.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the more space you got,
Where's all this data come from?
it's kind of been thrown around over time, but the Midwest Planning Service is where we've gotten most of these numbers from, and
Okay.
just clinical experience over the years. And it has been picked up by programs such as the Calf Care Quality Assurance Program
okay.
and Dairy Calf and Heifer as well. So
Okay.
this is our industry standard.
All right.
The size of the bed also plays a role in air quality. And when we're looking at air quality, we're looking at airborne bacteria counts in the pen. And so on the left-hand side here, we have airborne bacteria counts. And on the bottom, we are looking at the pen area. And you can see that as pen area increases, our airborne bacteria count decreases.
Okay.
The difference between these two lines is that this lower line is open panels,
Oh,
and then
okay.
this darker line is solid panels.
The
So
type of pen.
the type of pen that
Okay.
we're looking at. So obviously with mesh panels, there's a little bit more air movement between the space, whereas with a solid-sided panel, it's a little bit more constricted.
This data comes from Alfonso Lago's study long time ago again.
Before my time, as we
With
say.
Ken Nordland visiting calf barns in Wisconsin and trying to put this data together with a little machine that measured air quality, a portable fan that draws air over an agar plate so you could actually quantify the bacterial contamination of the air.
And that study was pivotal in how the Dairyland Initiative went about trying to design calf barns.
Totally changed the way we were thinking. Yep.
And so one of the things that came out of that study was that they had two main findings. One finding was that respiratory disease decreased when there were lower airborne bacteria counts in the pen.
Makes sense.
But, and this is a big but, solid panels between the calves were associated with increased airborne bacteria counts, but a decrease in respiratory disease.
Right.
Do you think that's because there was limited calf-to-calf contact?
I think it's that contact piece.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of butt heads against the group housing, pair raising. In a scenario like this, we'd remove the middle panel and have two calves together, but there is a potential risk of that nose-to-nose contact spreading pathogens.
Yeah, so we tried to think about, okay, what's the best of both worlds of getting air into the calf pen, but also limiting that calf-to-calf contact. So the ideal individual or pair-raised calf pen design would be to have solid panels between each calf or each pair of calves, but to have openings in the front,
open on the back and front,
and in the back, so that you get air movement through that pen.
Yep.
And then put a tube over the top of the pens and bring air.
So don't
from
make it
above as
a
well.
closed-in box. Make it
Exactly.
open on the top, the front and the back.
To keep
panels
that
on the
air
side.
movement, but to limit calf-to-calf contact.
Okay.
All right, so we've talked about giving calves enough space.
Yep.
Now we want to think about that resting space and making it dry and comfortable for them. One of the key things to think about is the thermoneutral zone of our calves. And what's really interesting is that the thermoneutral zone of a newborn calf up to a month is different than our older calves. So our newborn calves, they're more susceptible to the cold. And here in Wisconsin, that's really important. So we want to focus on keeping those calves warm and dry, especially during that first month. And then we have a little bit more of some forgiveness in those older calves.
And that thermoneutral zone is the range of temperatures that the animal isn't expending energy to maintain energy balance and body temperature. So 50 degrees sounds pretty high for a newborn calf.
Mm-hmm.
Below 50, they're actually expending energy on staying warm and maintaining homeostasis.
Exactly. So all that feed that you're giving them isn't going into growth. It's just trying to maintain warm. Yeah. But once they get up to a month old, their cold tolerance drops from 50 to 32 degrees.
Yeah, so that's 10 degrees centigrade and then 0 for our metric colleagues.
Yes.
Okay.
I want to look at bedding depth whenever I'm going in, and I know that Dr. Terry Olivet has done some small trials on farms recently, and she found that it was really important to target deep bedding for our younger calves because of their susceptibility to the cold.
I feel like there's a discussion of nesting going to come on here.
Goodness, yes. So our group has come up with the nesting score system, which is used to evaluate bedding depth.
Yep.
Fairly straightforward. There's only 3 points.
Oh, I love a 3-point system.
I know you do.
We don't need any more than 3.
Don't need any more. And so a nesting score of 1 is when a calf is lying down, her legs are completely exposed. So there's no way to keep herself.
So no way to nestle in.
Nestle in.
Okay.
Appropriate in hot climates, maybe in the summer here in Wisconsin, but not in the winter. We got a nesting score of 2, which I'd say is kind of the most common that I see.
Yeah, I can see a bit of leg there.
A little bit of leg.
They're nesting a little bit, but the legs are partially visible. I might not be able to see the toes, but I can kind of see the upper
see
part
the rest
of the leg.
Of the leg. So our ideal situation.
Yeah.
Oh, this one's the best. A nesting score of 3. That calf can dig and snuggle into the bedding and create this nice bubble of warm air around her, so she's not expending extra
and that
energy.
stuff's got to be dry, yeah? For this to work, that bedding has to be dry.
Exactly. To add a nesting score of 1, you can put calf jackets on. But that doesn't mean you have a nesting score of 3 and you put a calf jacket on, you get a nesting score of 4. Sorry, 3 is the highest.
Oh, 3 is the highest, okay.
But if you've got a nesting score of 2 and you add the calf jacket on, then you get
it helps a little bit.
It does, because calves get up and they jump around and they trample down the bedding, and so you might be like, well, I just put fresh bedding in and it was a nesting score of 3, and now all of a sudden they've laid on it a bit. And
but it doesn't get you from a 1 to a 3. They help a little bit. They don't help a lot.
Exactly. Okay. So good to have in our winter climates.
Okay.
But getting back to that study that Dr. Lago and Dr. Nordland did, they also were looking at nesting score and the prevalence of respiratory disease. So here on the left is prevalence of respiratory disease, and on the bottom, airborne bacteria counts. We've got no nesting at the top, so a nesting score of 1 here, a nesting score of 2, and a nesting score of 3. And
it's a big difference, Courtney.
It's a huge difference. I mean, if you're looking here, that's about 50% versus 20% prevalence.
It's more than half a reduction.
Yeah, so really important to have deep bedding.
Well,
for
just
calves.
as deeper bedding is good for our adult dairy cows, looks like it's important for baby calves as well.
Exactly.
I couldn't be happier.
Have you been paying attention, Dr. Cook?
Oh, okay. You're going to test me?
I'm going to test you. Do you see this calf here? What kind of a nesting score would you give her?
Well, I can see a little bit of leg, but it's got a jacket, so I'm guessing 3.
Ding, ding, ding! We have a winner.
Oh, smoked it.
How about this one?
Oh, this looks grim.
Yeah.
No nesting going on here at all, so I'd say this is a 1.
Yeah, you can see some. It looks like shavings here.
Bedding with a scrim of manure, we used to say.
How about this one?
There's a Courtney nestling into a bed there. Can't see your legs, Courtney.
I was sleeping on the job here.
And you got a jacket on.
I know, so over the top.
You're a full-on 3.
What type of bedding do you think we should be using, Dr. Cook?
It's got to be straw.
Oh, it's always straw. And it's the long straw as well, not
okay.
chop straw.
The chop straws for the dry cow diets, the long straws for the calves.
For our baby calves. So that is our gold standard, especially here in our colder months. Other types of materials that can be appropriate based on where the farm is might be sand, wood chips, corn stalks, other types of shavings.
Those are going to be better in the summer, though, yeah?
Those are better in the summer. And again, in those, I was just on a farm in Georgia, and they had sand. Made total sense because it was very
blazing hot.
But if you have bedding, you want to make sure that it's dry and that any urine or spilled milk from feeding is getting out of the pen. So if we have our nice long straw.
Are we going to talk about drainage again?
Oh, my goodness.
There are some similarities here, aren't there, folks?
Our last episode, it was
we spent
drainage.
a lot of time on drainage.
We do go back and edit these episodes minimally, and it was like, we talked a lot about drainage.
Oh, it's so important.
But guess what? We're going to talk more about drainage.
We're going to talk
just
about
for
it again.
Calves. So I went out to this farm, beautiful farm, and I walked into the calf barn, and I looked, and they have concrete under the beddings, and the concrete is nicely sloped, but it's kind of sloped in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I'm looking at that thinking something's amiss here.
Yeah, something's a little amiss. So the concrete itself has been sloped to the front of the pen, and if you look at this picture, there's a lot of moisture and I don't know if that's feed or...
well, everybody's going to be walking through that when they're feeding the calves, spreading whatever's in there around. So you got drainage, but bad drainage.
Not the best of drainage.
Okay.
So if you want to go with concrete is totally appropriate. I like to have a 2% slope to the concrete and get it away from where there's a lot of traffic. So in this calf barn, they did a couple of different slopes here.
I can see that. We got 2 channels, yeah?
We've got 2 channels. Usually there's 2 rows of individual calf pens in this barn.
Okay.
And under each set of calf pens, they have sloped the concrete towards the drainage channel.
Towards the back.
In the back of the pen.
Okay.
They've also got that drainage area in the front. Do you know where that's for?
That's for all the milk and water what they're slopping in the buckets, yeah?
Exactly. So they've crowned this center feed alley so that feed and water all gets there and goes out of the building.
So you're going to need a good concrete person to get this right.
Yeah, definitely.
Different slopes in different directions.
I feel like that should be a tagline for something.
I'm full of taglines, me.
Another option would be to just have individual drains under each of the individual pens. So this farm went and sloped the concrete towards an individual drain centered in the pen.
In the middle of the pen.
Yeah, and that also is a nice way to keep bedding dry.
That makes sense. Isn't that going to get blocked up with bedding, though?
Yes, so do make sure once calves are removed and you are going through the cleaning process to check that this drain is free of debris.
Okay.
Another concept that's been implemented is putting gravel underneath these calf pens in addition to some concrete. And so it's not super deep, just a little bit. And testimonials have been that bedding has stayed drier and that they've seen almost a 50%
they use less of it.
Reduction in bedding.
Oh, that's
so
less cost.
Least cost.
So you're going to spend some money prepping this, but then there are ongoing savings.
Yes. And now there is, it's a little bit harder to clean than concrete. And there is more work. These tend to get plugged up.
Yeah.
So I would say every 3 years or so, definitely go in and dig these up because it does get filled with fine particles.
Fine particles fill it up, yeah.
Where you put that drain tile can depend on your system. You could do the entire base of that calf pen with gravel.
Yeah.
You could just do the back portion where the calves spend
They're going to spend most of the time.
Or in a big group, you could put it down the center with concrete sloped to it. So, a couple of different options.
Yep.
Cleaning, though, like I said.
Clean with care.
Clean with another good slogan.
I'm just full of them today.
You are on a roll.
I've watched this video. This is cool. If you're viewing this, that skid steer driver's got some skills.
Lots of skills. I like how there is a short little concrete wall in the back.
Yeah. Just to push up against.
Just to push up against for the skid steer, but then it's also nice and low so that we are still getting air from that open curtain into the calf pen.
But look at that minimal disruption of the gravel base there. You're just picking up the used bedding.
Exactly. And so once that bedding is picked up, you'll come in.
Oh, it's my friend with the rake again. This is hard work.
This is hard work.
Let's rake gravel and sand. These are jobs that you'd love to have on a farm.
But just come back through, nicely distribute out that gravel, and again, because we've overbuilt this barn,
there's a week or so
we're going to let this just sit, so we are breaking any disease cycle that. Well,
thank goodness you're not doing it every milking anyway.
Oh,
so
geez. Then my last thing that I wanted to talk about for an essential element of calf barn design is ventilation.
Well, I wonder when we were going to get onto that. All this talk of nesting.
We got to get the basics down, and then we've.
It's all about air,
bottom,
folks.
And
it's
now
air
let's
quality.
talk about the rest of the barn. And so it really.
Let's do it.
We have that appropriately stocked barn, but now let's ventilate it.
Okay.
And so ventilation is going to help displace any moisture, heat, pathogens that are in the barn. How we do that is going to kind of depend.
You're going to bring in fresh air, yeah?
Fresh air.
Not the recycled stuff. You're not going to just put a ceiling fan up in the calf barn and hope that does something, because all that's doing is redistributing contaminated air.
So we'll talk about the two major forms of ventilation in a moment.
But we've got more guidelines. Where do these come from, Courtney?
Some research papers, actually, this time. It's amazing.
Good.
People did study this.
Got some hard science behind
1979 for one of them.
Okay.
So.
A little aged. Like me.
Anyways, there's two school of thoughts for ventilation rates. You can look at it as the air changes for the barn.
Okay, air changes per hour. So the entire volume of the barn, how many times that volume's turned over per hour.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or you can look at airflow per animal. But we've had more success, and it's a little bit easier when we talk about air changes per hour. So do you know what the minimum recommended rate for all aged animals on the farm
I do, because you mentioned it earlier, Courtney.
I did. Were
you listening,
attention?
Folks? I was listening.
Oh, good. What was it?
It's 4.
It is 4, and so
I'm acing this today.
A+, Dr. Cook. You deserve a gold star.
A minimum of 4 air changes an hour.
There's been a little bit, here as our winters are slightly milder than they used to be. We've seen people look at 4 to 6 air changes an hour. If we go over to your part of the world, Dr. Cook,
might need to be up at 8.
Might be closer to 8. So it does depend on where you are. But here in Wisconsin, I like to focus on 4 to 6.
What's the danger of 8 in a cold Wisconsin winter, Courtney?
We might be cooling the barn a little bit too much.
It's that 50-degree minimum, the temperature.
The thermoneutral zone of the calf. And so we don't want to cool the barn too much. I mean, if we are doing appropriate feeding rates, providing them with a dry, comfortable place to rest.
Okay.
And doing those things well.
You can tolerate it a little bit. Got to be careful.
We got to be careful.
Okay.
So how do we then ventilate the space? 2 common types of ventilation systems are natural ventilation and mechanical. The problem with our naturally ventilated barns and calves is that they aren't generating as much heat. So we don't have this chimney effect or stack effect where warm air rises
and exits through the ridge. There's a ridge opening in the middle of the ceiling.
as fresh air is coming in through an open eave or open curtain.
Okay.
And then once we get to the summer months, it gets really hard because we're just relying on wind. And I don't know.
And 4 air changes now isn't going to cut it in the summer.
We need to up it to 40
Oh, wow.
air
So
changes an hour.
tenfold increase again. You're relying on the wind for that.
Yeah, but the wind doesn't always blow.
Well, in Madison, Wisconsin, Courtney, 20% of the time the wind doesn't blow on average.
So what do you do? And those are questions that we are currently looking into as an industry.
Okay.
Then you might say, okay, well, if we can't rely year-round on natural ventilation, well, then why don't we go to mechanical?
Yeah, let's buy some fans.
Yeah, let's, have a inlet that's bringing in fresh air and fans exhausting air as an outlet.
Negative pressure.
Negative pressure barns.
Okay.
But that's quite costly to operate.
Yeah, there's some electricity involved and some bit of wiring.
A little bit. It's harder to manage the inlets, especially with all that dust and debris flying around.
They're small. I think we talked about that before. They're just in those little calf barns, you could potentially be dealing with inlets that are half an inch wide.
It's harder to evenly distribute the air in the barn, especially when we have those solid barriers between pens.
Yeah.
And so
it's not so easy, is it? Yeah.
No.
I feel like we might have to cover this in a future episode.
We're going to dedicate an entire episode on calf barn ventilation.
Yep.
But to wrap up this episode, I just wanted to say again, it's really important that we have an appropriately stocked barn. I mean, that's going to solve a lot of issues, getting into ventilation and air quality, but then also creating a dry, comfortable place for our calves to rest so that they can put their energy into growing instead of just trying to maintain their energy balance.
That's it. Excellent stuff.
That wraps it up.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thanks for joining us. The Dairyland Initiative is supported by industry leaders who are advancing cow comfort worldwide. We would like to say a special thank you to our premier sponsor, Saputo, who is providing the global community with high-quality dairy products made from high-quality milk from healthy and well-cared-for animals. We'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsors, SaveCows.com, Zinpro, GPS Dairy Consulting, 40 Barn, Sure Gain Trout Nutrition, Munters, J&D Manufacturing, VES Artex, Ventec, and Kestrel Instruments. Thanks for tuning in to the Dairyland Initiative podcast. Want more Dairyland Initiative? Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on our socials, and visit our website for all of the latest recommendations in dairy cattle housing and management. See you next time.